Hello friends, and welcome back to the next video about advanced DAX. This time we dive into the running total or cumulative sales for this year as well as for the prior year, and I'll also show you a little fix for a problem which often occurs with a running total. So let's get into it. At first, I right click on my measures table to create a new measure. So right click and create new measure. So let me click it in just a second, and here we go, there's our measure, and let me just zoom in so you can see it a little bit better on your screens. So this will be the cumulative sales. Of course, you can although name them differently, so let's say cum sales. Okay, cumulative sales in my case, and then it says equal to, so it's equal to, and now we can specify a measure. Now for the measure, we already know that for the cumulative sales, remember, we need to change the filter context, because no matter what kind of visualization we use, whether it's a table or any other kind of visual, for instance, an area chart, which we're going to use in our visualization, but could be any kind of visual, we always have a filter context. So for each point in the visual itself, could be a row in a table or a data point in a pie chart or any other kind of chart, you always have a filter context. Now for the cumulative sales, we need to modify this context. So in order to do this, we already learned that we can use the calculate function for that. So if we say calculate, and now we define the expression. The expression, in my case, I will go with the total sales again. However, as I said before, you can use any kind of measure you want. Now, if I type in total sales here, total sales, here we go, I can use it, the measure itself, and then I need to use a filter expression. So the filter expression always returns a table. That means that the calculate function evaluates an expression, which in our case is the total sales, in a new context. And this new context will be a new table, which we define by this filter argument here in the second part. So I'd say that I want to filter, in this case, I want to filter a table. Then the table will be all selected. Remember, we can use this in order to remove any outside filters. So in this case, from this visual, for instance, what we had before with drinks, cheese, and so on. But this, in this case, for the dates, because we want to have a running total, a cumulative sum. So all selected, then from our dates table, date this argument, that's fine. So this means that we return now a complete dates table. And as a second argument for the filter expression, we want to filter this table back. Because only with this table like that, which we currently have, we would simply get the total amount of sales, because here we simply take into account the complete date range we have in our model. So in our sales table. So that is why we say here for the second argument, and maybe like to actually go in here and say Shift Enter, just to go to new line, just to write it a little bit more nice from the formatting section here. And then for the filter all selected, dates table date, then we can simply say the filter expression will be that the dates table date, so the dates table date itself, this column here, should be less or equal to the maximum of the dates table date. So it's kind of similar formula we have already taken a look at, and this is kind of rehearsal for us. But of course, let me also go maybe in here and just modify this a little bit, just to have it nicer format. Okay, so first so good. So now if I press enter, let's have a look at the cumulative sales. So at first I like to actually maybe go to a new page here, and then simply say this will be the cum sales, and then I simply go to my, let's start with a table here. Let's just quickly check that out. So if we go with our dates table and use our date and drag it into the values, or simply tick it, then we get the hierarchy. If we untick this one and the quarter, because I only want to have the year and a month, just for this visualization purpose, then I go inside here and say for the value section, just to make it bigger so you can see that better on your screens. So 15, I think that's fine. So we've got the year and the month as combination here. And now if we have a look, just to check our data, if we take a look at the total sales, we can see that here we got simply the total sales for each month-year combination. And if I make this even a little bit more bigger here, and then go with the cumulative sales, if we take this one here, we see that here we get a running total or cumulative sales, right? So 34,000, then here the sum of those two, and so on. So this already works exactly the way we want. Maybe one slight little thing. Go to the cumulative sales here, simply tick it, and then go to the dollar symbol just to format it correctly. And of course, I'd like to have this not auto, but set it to 2. And press enter, and here we go. The correct number format. That's fine. So we got this. Now, what if we like to shift this? Remember, we have the option, when we use time intelligence, to shift data back. Now we can also do this for our cumulative sales. in order to shift our cumulative sales also 1 year back, we basically need to have the same structure as we have already here, so this one, but we simply need to replace our measure, our base measure, which is the total sales here. So we need to first calculate the total sales last year, so for the prior year, and then we simply put this prior year's total sales measure inside this function. That is the idea. So let's do that. At first we need the total sales from the prior year, so from last year. That is why I right click on the measures table and go to new measure. Now this new measure is simply the total sales last year or prior year, and then it's equal to, and I want to calculate, modify the context, an expression. The expression itself will be the total sales. And now you could, as a filter argument, use either the same period last year function or the date add function. So both are possible. However, I personally prefer the date add function because it's more flexible. So in our case, really, it's your personal preference, but if you want to change this later on to quarter or month level, then the date add function would be the only one to where you can do this. So I need to refer to my dates table, and in my dates table, the continuous date column, so this one. Then the date add, not done yet, so number of intervals will be -1, and the interval itself will be the year level, like that. And that is actually it. So of course you could also, if you want to make this a bit nicer, you could go to a new line, press Shift Enter, and then basically place it maybe here, or like that. So like that maybe, and press Enter. So it's not required, you can do that if you want. Just formatting your measures. So I press Enter for now, and then we got our total sales last year. Now for this total sales last year, I also like to, as long as it's highlighted, click on the dollar symbol here. So I format it as a currency, but maybe also type in 2 here for decimal places, just to be sure we really have 2 decimal places. And now if we go here, select the table, and put the sales last year in the table, just to see that it works correctly, we can see that, yes, exactly, we get the numbers from 2019 in July 2020, so shifted back. So that works fine for us. So far, so good. Now what we like to accomplish is that we start here with the 34,000 and so on, and then in the next column we have then the 66,742. So basically this measure here should then appear here, right? So shifted 1 year, or based on the sales from the prior year, we would like to calculate this cumulative sales. And this works exactly the same way as we have done here. So the only thing we need to do is actually replace the total sales number here. So you can either rewrite it if you want, or you can also select everything, press Ctrl+C to copy it, and then you right click on the measures table and say you'd like to create a new measure. And here it is. And then you can simply paste this inside. Of course you need to rename it because you can't have 2 measures with the same name, but you simply can type in LY for cumulative sales last year. And then you simply need to replace the measure. So instead of using total sales, we're simply referring to the total sales, but from the prior year or from the last year. And that's it. That's the modification of the formula. So we're referring to the total sales from the prior year and do exactly the same running total calculation as we've done before. And you can see that, remember, the total sales last year was actually a measure wrapped in a calculate function because we needed to change the filter context. And what we do here is we wrap it in another calculate function, which in this case is here for the cumulative sales last year, and also modify the filter context again. So you can basically wrap modified measures and calculations you have within other modifications where you use calculate based on a calculate, right? Calculate based on this measure. So let's actually press Enter. And then we have the measure. It's appearing here. Of course, I also like to format this as a dollar symbol. So it's a currency. And then I'll also type in a 2 here just to make sure that I have only 2 decimal places. Okay, and now let's actually also visualize that. So I click on the cumulative sales here, ticket, and now we can see we got exactly what we wanted. So starting with 34,000 and so on, then we got 66, then 99, and so on. Exactly the numbers we can see up there, right? 34, 66, 99, 146, 146. So exactly what we expected. So that works fine. So far, so good. Now a common issue which we see is that if I scroll down, you see that even though our last total sales number was actually in May 2021, we still see the same number recurring for the running total sales to the end of the year. The same is true here for this one here, for instance. We also see exactly the same behavior. Now this is not always wanted. not only in a table, but let's actually switch the visualization. I make this table a bit smaller, leave it here inside for you, so you can look it up in the resources, but let's actually visualize it differently. Let's go with here the area chart, for instance. I can select my area chart, make sure that you first click somewhere on the blank canvas, so you deselect the table, because you don't want to modify it. You now can select the area chart, or any other kind of chart you want, and make it bigger, that's fine. And now in my area chart, I need an axis, and then I need some values. So let's say I'm using my date field here, so I can tick on date, and I got my axis here, that's fine. And then I'd like to see my cumulative sales, right? So I'll tick on the cumulative sales, and what I get here, it looks like that. Okay, so let's actually drill in, maybe a little further, and here we can see the issue much better. So let's actually drill even more, let's see, and we have this kind of issue in here, right? So let me actually maybe let's make it a little bit smaller, looks better like that. Now, we see that we have this trend up here. It's simply aggregating the data across all the years, so that's totally fine. But then, at the end, we have this flat line here, right? Simply, this is exactly reflecting what we see in the table as well. So if I scroll a little bit to the right, you can see that the total number is recurring here. Because our last sales date was actually in May, and then we do not have any sales anymore. Because this date has not yet arrived so far, right? That is why we see a recurring number here. And if you plot it or visualize it in any way, you also see this flat line here, which is exactly this 1.35 million, which we can see in the tooltip here. The same is true for the running total for the prior year. So actually this number here has exactly the same behavior as we had. So it's actually actually not, sorry, the prior year not, because we have the prior year, so 2020 we have the full data set, so that's why the issue is not appearing here, but the issue is occurring here, of course, for this total value. But let's actually also plot the cumulative sales from the prior year, just to have this also in comparison, and we can see exactly what we have here, right? So this line is not flattening here simply because we have the prior year data. Because here in December, of course, we are in December 2020, where still data is available. Here it is, no, February, January, and here we go, this value here. Okay, so the issue actually only occurs here currently, but of course could be the case that it appears in several of your measures. So how can we avoid this? Well, we could modify our cumulative sales here slightly. If I take a look at the formula, currently what we do, or what we tell here, is that we want to have the total sales, then we want to have the complete dates table, so ignoring filter context, which could come here in our visual from the axis, and in our table from the rows we have. This is the filter context. Now we say with the all selected we want to remove this context. So ignore, for instance, that here it is January 2020, we want to completely ignore this. Instead we would like to take a look at our complete dates table, which we have here, and then we would like to say that the dates table should less or equal to the maximum of the dates table. However, I already told you that the maximum here is again referring to what we have in the view. This is the only part which is referring to the view itself. That is why we simply get the cumulative number in here. Now, if we, instead of using the dates table date here as a maximum, referring to the date we have in the orders table, or in our sales table, let's actually scroll down here. In our orders table here, if I make this bigger, we can see that here in the orders table we have an order date. And this is actually the referring date we have. So we know that the last order date is actually the point where we peak, because after this date there are no orders anymore. So this is why we could actually modify our cumulative sales a little bit. We could say here, for the cumulative sales, that instead of using the maximum from the dates table, we simply say we would like to have the maximum from our orders table. So if I'm referring to my orders table here, and then to the order date, so orders, let's just see, order date, there it is, this one here. If I'm referring to this table here, then watch what happens with the visual. So if let me actually press enter here, and we see that now, just a second, we exactly stop here, right? We exactly stop at the last day, which in this case is the 2nd of May, sorry, with our visualization here. And of course, if this is an issue for you, that this still continues, if you also want to stop it here, then of course the only thing you need to do is to go to the cumulative sales from the last year and do the modification exactly the same way. So instead of using the dates table date, you could also refer to the orders table and there the order date. This one. Press tab to select it, and now you see that if I do this and press enter, you'll see that this second line will also stop here. So let's try that. Press enter, and we see now it also stops here at the 2nd of May in 2021, which is the last sales date, right? So this is one way to do it, and you also see, if you take a look back at the table, if I make this smaller, that this table here also stops now, for the total sales in here, in this value here, and the same is true for the running total. It also stops in May, and also for the cumulative sales last year, it also stops in May. The only thing which continues is this total sales last year, because this is a formula which we have not modified in that way. Okay, but this is one way which you can do. Let me actually click this one more time and maybe make this smaller again so we can see the whole table here. So this would be one way to modify this and to make sure that you don't have this flat line, because this is sometimes a little bit annoying, doesn't look too good in the visual. So if you have data like that, then now you know how you can avoid it. Refer to the maximum date in your orders table or sales table. Okay, so that's it for this video. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you understood what we did. I just want to encourage you, try it out yourself. Also, take a look at the resources from the course if you want. And as always, hopefully see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.